Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya. Shri Advaita Gadadhara. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Coming today is the final day of January, the 31st of January, the last day of the month. This is the day that we proceed on the Bhagavad Gita, and according to the schedule, we hope to accomplish 3 chapters per month, so that within the 6-month time frame, we've done a preliminary Bhakti Shastri study. Preliminary specifically so that those who wish to go on further could perhaps advance to the actual program on the here and now. But if not, it's still valuable to know what's in that program for ourselves, for our own personal study or for follow-up study, because many devotees have done Bhakti Shastri. And the Bhagavad Gita can never be exhausted. It's eternal, and understandings of it, realizations, and doing what we study. So today is, the emphasis is on the chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita, and our objectives are to commit to memory the chapter title, the size, the sections, section titles, size of the sections, as well as learning the first 2 verses that we should have learned one last for chapter 2. There's a key memory verse for chapter 2, and we'd like to learn the key memory verse for chapter 3. In chapter 4 we will have 4 memory verses, 5:1 and 6:1. So that means next month, when we try to go through chapters 4, 5, and 6, we want to commit to memory. In addition, we want to go over the homework questions in the study guide. We have, I think, about 8 homework questions for this section. We also wish to make everyone here aware of the resources available from the study guide for chapter 3. Resources include the summaries for the breakdowns, and there are 3 charts in the back section that are related to chapter 3. These are on the brain cycle, lust, where it's located, and what is the yogi for this. So knowing your resources is the first step. What's available to me? What can help me? So the first thing, if we take out our little 1881 book, you have that small little study guide book. That's our really basic introduction. And if you take out your writing slates, we call them your computers, your iPads. We are not providing the charts for chapter 3. Those will come at the point when on our other schedule, remember we're following a parallel schedule, those will be handed out when on your SMSs we come up to the end of chapter 2. But if we jump ahead with the charts, I think that's a little too much information right now. So in your little 1881, if you could all turn to the chapter 3 section, the little map with the codes. So on your computer, you will open up to the book, Bhagavad Gita, right down first. Your computer or your iPad. Open it up, Bhagavad Gita. Just as if you get a book, you open it up to the section you want. So today the section that we want is chapter 3. So we'll write that. Remember, retention in Kali Yuga requires multisensory action. And the plenty of interaction and plenty of revision. It's almost inconceivable that only 5,000 years ago people could hear something once and never forget. And try as we might. So we have to take help from what experts say increases retention. We have to take help because it is important for us to hear it again and again and again and again. Not only for the sake of purification, but for the sake of explaining and preaching to others. This is a preaching mission. So now we have opened up our computer to the 3rd chapter, and our cursor shows the size. 43. This has how many verses? 43 verses, that's right. So again, multisensory means I use all of the senses that are applicable to my study. So the first one is I heard it, and the second was I did what? I saw it. And then the third one was I repeated it. I spoke it. And the fourth sense was tactile. I wrote it. And tactile may also be kinesthetic, signals. Signals are very helpful. The only thing here, the 5th sense, is taste, but we have prasadam at the end. That's a process too. So multisensory education is a reality.
Although this is very sweet, the class you're giving, so I say that's
so taste. You say that's taste too. So rasa, the rasa that comes from this. Okay. So we have opened up our Gita now to the 3rd chapter, and it is showing that we have 43 slokas. Right? And as we turn to our little study aid, our little skills handbook, it shows us that on this chapter we have a title. And the title is Karma GY, right? Use symbols also as shorthand. The title of chapter 3 is Karma Yoga. So this much now we understand. So now we know the chapter title, Karma Yoga, it has 43 verses. And as we quickly just even look at the image in the little booklet, we see the central image says Karma Yoga, but the circles around it indicate the major subdivisions, the important divisions that Krishna will discuss in this chapter. So we see, how many do we see? 4. We see 4. Right, we see 4 subdivisions to this chapter. So we will show these on our computer now with a series of 4 dots. And we would like to now know, we know the size of the whole thing. We would like to know now the location and size of each of these topics. So the first topic, we find it starts with the 1st verse, and it concludes with the 9th verse. And some people may not find that so important, but actually it really is, because part of our understanding has been to see how writing proceeds logically, how speaking proceeds logically. And we will see when we analyze these sections, if we analyze the 1st verse and we analyze the last verse, we will see that Krishna proceeds logically. There will be either a question or an important statement, there will be a conclusion, and in between there will be steps of logic, examples and arguments that lead you as the reader to the conclusion and the link to the next topic. It's brilliant. So this is really important to understand that, because then you can pinpoint the flow of thinking. Otherwise the verses might not quite open up for you so much. So from 1 to 9 we'll see how Krishna, and how Arjuna makes question, states a question, and then how concisely Krishna responds and answers to bring him to a new level of realization. Then we start with 10, right? And 10 will take us logically to what? 16. Now we're going to see another development of a philosophical point, or truth. And again, we have to proceed from the statement in 10 to the conclusion in 16. And how does Krishna develop that section? Then we start logically with the number what?
17.
17. You'll see that in your book and you write it on your Now this is a very large one. This is a very large one. So this has many subsections. And this concludes with Sloka 13:5. So from 17 to 35, we're going to be hearing another level of understanding. Everything is building up to higher and higher levels of understanding. Our last section begins with 36. And the chapter concludes with 43. So we go from 1 to 9, 17, and these are odd numbers. Some way to help us remember. And then the next two are even, 10, 16, and 16. Then the next two are odd, 17, 35. And the last two, well, we have an even one and an odd one. 1, 9, 10, 16, 17, 35, 36, and 43. And we're going to try a little activity today. And we're going to try to involve people a little bit more. Interestingly, I've gotten some inspiration from what you do in your Sanskrit. So I always hear a trick. Okay. So what's our first number we have to remember? 1. And the next number? 9. 9. And what's the next number we have to remember? 10. And what's the next number, Sylvie? This is a good way to catch people. Okay, she said 10. So what's the next number we have to remember?
After 10? Yeah. 16.
Okay, then what do we have to remember? 10?
35.
Very good. And what do we have to remember?
36.
Okay, and what do we have to remember?
43.
Okay, you started now.
1.
9.
10.
16.
17. 35. 36.
42.
1.
9.
10.
16.
17.
36.
43.
Okay.
1. 9.
10.
16.
0.
37.
Okay.
36.
And
43.
good. Yes. Now.
That's a good one.
Yes.
Use that.
Yes. We'll be trying this today. We'll be trying this today. We'll be trying this with our sloka. Okay. So can you erase this now and very quickly now that you've really worked your muscle? Brain is a muscle. It takes practice. Can you recreate what we just had on your screen before you erased it? See how quickly you can do it? Yeah.
It's faster.
I'm sorry.
It's faster.
We want you to go home today.
It's very fast. Computing.
Yes, yes.
Medical.
This is a fun thing. Okay. Everybody now really got it now. Now we're going to be really active today. It's a cold day, so we have to stay warm and keep our body warm. Okay, so everybody knows. Now you know in chapter 3 the numbers and the sections. Now we want to know what's in those sections, right? Right. So our first topic is a question. Do I renounce work or do I work in devotion? So we put RW or love to work or devotion. Which of the two? Renunciation of work or devotion? Let's hope we don't have that background music all the time. That man's working in devotion. He's working. wonderful ways to keep us laughing. Either in ourselves or in the way he's orchestrating life. Okay, working in devotion. All right, so everybody knows. What section is that in? 129. Right, so obviously think about it now. Let's think. In this section, Arjuna will ask a question. Do I renounce work or do I work in devotion? And in 9 verses, Krishna will give his answer. And not only that, why? Because it's not arbitrary. Why should you do this? And he's the final authority. So by the end, we should be able to agree, yes, it's better to work in devotion than to renounce work. And then we'll see how many arguments he'll give. Okay? So now you have a little bit of an understanding on 1 to 9. Renunciation work or work in devotion? All right. 10 to 16. Now we have a progression. Progression in the jiva. He goes from wanting or taking to giving. The tendency of the conditioned soul is here to take. It's here to take. But the spiritual objective is to give. So we come from karma kanda to karma yoga. Because yoga means not pressing your nose, not sitting up nicely to have a nice body. Yoga means linking with the Supreme. Yoga means to link. So we have yoga societies, and it's a step, at least you become conscious. But the real point, the essential point is often missing. That yoga means my objective is to link with the Supreme. That's the goal. Not just a beautiful body or better health or, able to breathe in the smog. There's a goal, and the goal is my objective is to link with the Supreme. So I go from karma kanda, right? Fruitive. I still want, and I do it legally. I do it according to Shastra. I don't just take without any inhibitions at all. That's animal one. Karma yoga, I perform duty, but I have a goal, and that is I'm linking with the Supreme, and I'm giving everything to Krishna. Okay? So, renunciation of work or work in devotion, 1 through 9. Now, the advancement from karma kanda to karma yoga, and that is 10 to 16. Then the next section is a very important one. You see how long it is. So when a section is very long, there's a lot of emphasis there. This one is performing prescribed duty to set the example. Right? The key word there is example. Right? So here we have, I think I put just the E for example. Right? E, example. But perform prescribed duty to set the example. And we'll hear different levels now of everybody acts, whether he's realized or not. Everybody acts. Some people act with knowledge. Some people are liberated and they don't need to act, but they still do. To set the example. So here we're going to hear descriptions and examples of great personalities, including Krishna, a liberated person, who still act to set the example, and how they interact with those who have not reached their platform. Okay? So you're going to hear a lot in here. Right? Everybody has to work. Everybody has to act. Everybody has to work, including great souls like Janak, personalities such as Lord Krishna. And how do they, on their platform, deal with those who have not reached their level of knowledge? Quite a bit there. 17 to what? 35. Now, there's always a danger, no matter what we do. There's always something in the way. And this section deals a lot with sin. The topic of sin comes up. And Arjuna is wondering, why are people forced to act in such a way helplessly in this world and commit sin? Because we're going to hear now how to act in such a way as to not commit sin, how to not get sinful reaction. But then Arjuna says, but why are people forced to act sinfully? After all of this discussion, we're hearing very high, elevated things. But what forces people? So here we find out it is lust. Beware of lust and the resultant anger, which keeps people bound up in material existence. 36 to 43. In that section, we're going to hear many analogies, very important analogies, and how the living entity can curb and conquer us. So let's go over this one more time. Renunciation of work and devotion. And the next one is Now, how do I work to set the example? Right. How do those who are even liberated, or Krishna, how do they work to set the example? 17:35. And finally, well, what causes people to sin? Big lust, the all-devouring enemy of this world. 36 to 43. All right. So can you now very quickly on your computers, your laptops, can you recreate this? So now you have a solid mental image of the structure of this chapter. Share it with your neighbor so that you can check to be sure the understanding was correct. Make sure that the answer is correct.
Today we are learning
Verbally or just verbally is important to quickly.
Work in devotion to set the example. With detachment to set the example comes the 17:35. Beware of lust and anger. That is 36 to
Well, some of them are still checking. Please turn to your study guide summary for chapter 2. Questions? What page? 43. Page 43 progressively takes us to a higher level of understanding. Each step, page 43, we have this study guide summaries for the breakdowns we have just now memorized. Remember, everything that is systematic will bring fruit. If something's chaotic, it won't bring much.
There are 43 verses in this chapter.
43 verses. So you saw memory day. Good for you. So now we have, let us revise the steps we took. First we opened up the book to Bhagavad Gita and we went to chapter 3 and found out it was 43 verses. We know the title is Karma Yoga. And we now have memorized quickly, very nicely today. 1, 9, 10, 16, 17, 35, and 36, 43. And we know the topics to be, renunciation of work, devotion. The second was from Karma Yoga. Third was work with form to prescribe duty to set the example. And the last one is beware of lust. So now we're ready for more. Right? Now we're ready for more. So what we will do now is we will, because we know we've memorized the heading. Right? We've memorized the heading. It's not that we just read it. We actually have memorized it. So now we want to know more. These summaries are a skill. To write a summary is a skill. How to be able to extract from 9 verses a few sentences. This is a skill. Because if we see how this is done, we will be able to adopt that skill. We're going to go around sentence at a time. The topic is renunciation of work or work and devotion. It's the question. So Krishna Das will read the first statement. Now, even in a summary, we get 3 parts. We'll get, the first part is tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them. Everything will have these 3 parts. He will read, we'll go around 1 sentence at a time, because this keeps people alert. And remember, another skill, active reading means I use the body. The body helps. Use the index finger. As your cursor helps on your computer. It focuses the mind, it draws the attention, and it keeps the eye from some jumping around, which we don't even detect. The eye is moving this way, and we don't even notice that. But the hand, the kinesthetic approach, will help your attention to be focused. And it increases your speed. Can you kindly read the first statement in the summary? All right. Oh, I'm sorry, it's on the page before. It's on page 42, forgive me. You have here a chapter summary, forgive me. This is normal. Because here we have summaries and sub-summaries. 1 sentence at a time. Now remember, as we're reading, look for context words. These are the words that have the meaning. In, the, of, at, on. These are what we call, they actually link it together. But the context words are the important. So can you read the first statement? All right.
In chapter 2, many different paths are explained, such as Sankhya Yoga, Buddhi Yoga, control of the senses by intelligence, and work without fruitive desire.
All right, everybody think about this now. Think. How many paths? Different, right? Different paths. And what are they?
Sankhya Yoga,
Buddhi Yoga, control of the senses,
And work
by
without
intelligence,
fruitive
and work without fruitive desire. In this statement we have about 5 points. Right. We have about 5 points. We're going to hear about different paths, such as Sankhya, Buddhi, control of the sense by intelligence, and work without fruitive desire. Okay, Datri, can you read the next
Krishna
statement?
told Arjuna to keep all abominable activities far distant by Buddhi Yoga.
All right, so here we have who? Krishna and Arjuna. And we have what kind of activities? Abominable. And what is the way to do that?
By Buddhi Yoga.
Yes, avoid abominable by what? Buddhi Yoga. This is what's being recommended, Buddhi Yoga. All right, can you read the next statement, Pamela?
Taking the meaning of Buddhi as intelligence, Krishna's order would mean that Arjuna, by using his intelligence, should avoid all abominable activities and not fight.
All right, now here you have what is the essence of Arjuna's question. Because it means an understanding of the definition of the word abominable and intelligence. So here he's saying taking the meaning of buddhi as meaning intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Krishna's order would mean that Arjuna, by using his intelligence, should avoid all abominable activities and not fight. But Arjuna has misinterpreted the word intelligence, right, and abominable activities. So here we have Arjuna's lack of understanding, really, of buddhi. So it has to be clarified in this chapter. Because if buddhi means intelligence, he said, well, it's intelligent for me to avoid abominable actions. We would be fighting. It's abominable to fight. So now let's get a clarification, Sylvie.
Yet, thinks Arjuna, Krishna is still urging me to fight.
Right. You're telling me to perform an abominable action. That's confusing to Arjuna. It's really not confusing to Arjuna, but it may be confusing to the reader. So we have to have clarification in this chapter. This is a big, important clarification. Next.
Arjuna thinks
No, Rangi is the next one.
No, Arjuna thinks that karma and jnana are not compatible.
Right. Here he thinks that karma, meaning work, and jnana, meaning knowledge, are incompatible. How can knowledge, which is jnana is higher. Jnana means usually inaction. And karma means action. They're not compatible. That's what he thinks.
Do you guys know what compatible means?
Compatible. Let's have a good guess. This is checking for meaning. Compatible. Do you know what compatible means?
Yeah.
Compatible. Very good. Thank you. Compatible means that two things get along. For instance, you may say that are fire and water compatible?
No.
No, one puts out the other. Right? Certain personalities may be incompatible. Some personalities are compatible. Certain spices are compatible with certain foods. They're harmonious. Harmonious is a good word, okay? Compatible. Company. All right? Now let's see what happens in the last statement here. Actually, we're getting the summary. This is a good thinking skill. How did this person write this chapter summary? All right, Lanaji?
Actually, karma and jnana are two stages on the path to transcendental consciousness.
Okay, so his conclusion here is actually karma and jnana, that means work and intelligence, are two stages on the path to transcendental consciousness. And today we've given you your handout on the yoga ladder. We will be looking at this a little later. Now, have you seen in the summary? It starts out saying many different paths were explained, but what does the final sentence tell us?
Karma and
That they're stages. Right. They're stages.
Two stages.
And we're going to find out how they are not actually incomplete. All right. Now, our next, we know the subtopics. Renunciation of work or work and devotion. Now, who's our next reader? Anand? Could you read the next statement?
Renunciation of work and devotion. In his confused state, Arjuna asks Krishna to clarify his previous instructions.
So here, this chapter opens up with a request for clarification, for the sake of all of us. Do we give up work, or do we work in devotion? Next.
Krishna explains how karma yoga, devotional service, is superior to renunciation of work, and he also recommends sacrifice for Vishnu, which frees one from the bondage of work.
Alright, so here we have, he explains karma yoga is superior, and he also recommends the next step, which is what?
Sacrifice.
Right, sacrifice for Vishnu. Right, in other words, perform your work. But now we're entering into sacrificing it for whom?
For
For Vishnu. And why?
Because it is
It
freeing
frees one from the
the
bondage
bondage
of
of
work.
work.
So that is our concluding verse. 9. 3.9. So he's now taking us to a new level, which leads into the next section. All right? Ramanama, can you read the next statement?
From Karma Kanda to Karma Yoga. Previously, Krishna established that one should not artificially renounce activities, but should perform prescribed duties in a detached way.
So now we're hearing what Krishna has said in the previous section. Artificial renunciation is done to be done, but perform your duty. But what's the secret?
Detached.
Detachment is the secret. It's not just do the duty with detachment. Are you able to see well enough, Neela, to read the next statement?
So,
Now,
now he explains the course of action for those who are not yet at the stage of detached work. I wish, but wish to attain it.
Yes, this is important. We may not be on the Brahmabhuta platform, right? But because we're here, it's indicative that we wish to attain a higher state. Krishna is kind. He doesn't condemn us because we're not at a certain stage. But the desire to attain a higher stage must be there. Right? Does that all make sense?
Yes.
Right. Just as if somebody last night was saying, well, I may not be able to chant just to please Krishna, but obviously I'm still chanting. I haven't reached that state, but I haven't also given it up. So that's a healthy sign. Healthy sign here. How do those who have not reached the stage of detached work but wish to attain it? What's the process? What's the process for them? So now we're going to go over to Rasamrita, and she will read the next statement.
By satisfying their material desires in a religious way, those who are attached will be purified.
Okay, so now if I act in a what kind of a way?
Religious.
Religious way, I will become purified enough to act on a higher platform. And I also will get knowledge that will enable me to act with more knowledge and more detachment. This is the system. This is the yoga ladder. This is the process. Now Anita will read the final statement. This is our summary statement to this summary. Okay?
As explained before, the purpose of sacrifice is to satisfy Vishnu.
Okay, I'm sorry. That's the
that's
next statement. I
fine.
thought this was the last
Yes.
one. Okay. As explained before, the purpose of sacrifice is what?
To
Satisfy,
Vishnu.
yes. That is the purpose of sacrifice. Some people may sacrifice to, help the poor people of China, or, pay for my child's education. But what is the real purpose of sacrifice? To satisfy Vishnu. And now we're coming back to Krishna Das. He will read the final conclusive statement to the summary. Okay.
Now Krishna will show how production of grains is dependent on sacrifice and how the origin of such sacrifice is Vishnu.
Yes, because someone will wonder, why did they throw that into this section, the production of grains? What does that have to do with it? So we're going to see a very interesting cycle here, how everyone is dependent on Krishna because we have to eat, and we have to have grains, and grains have to come from rain, and rain comes from yajna, and yajna is prescribed by the Shastra, and the Shastra is given by Vishnu, and the whole thing comes back to God. Okay, so this whole section, that's a very important thing in section 10 through 16, the cycle of sacrifice. Now, in our next section, the big one, 17 to 35, our first statement. What is our first introductory statement, Kamala?
Karma Yoga, performing detached work to set the example.
Okay, and read the first statement.
In verses 17, 20 to 21, Krishna describes the position of a self-realized person in relation to work.
Okay, so you have the word position, self-realized, and
Relation.
work. The relationship of one who's self-realized and work.
We missed Datri Mataji.
It's okay. What did I miss?
We missed Datri Mataji to
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. A, forgive me. She will go back. Thank you. We have to have monitoring here. Thank you. We have a class monitor. I remember when I was little, it was a real privilege in our school. Nobody ever did anything wrong in those days. But really, that much, really. You know, in the old days, it was like you threw chewing gum on the floor or something, you know. But if you were good, you got to sit in the hallway with your desk during a particular period in high school, junior high. And you were the hall monitor. And if somebody was walking through the hallway, they would have to show you the pass. That they had permission to be in the hallway. And where they were going. They were going to the library, perhaps, or they were going to see the principal, or perhaps they had to use the restroom. So you were monitors. So he's our monitor. He's making sure, right, just like in the Yajnas, are the Brahmanas chanting properly. Okay. So we have skipped one of our Brahmanas over here. So please go ahead. All right, go ahead.
What now? What?
Although he need not.
Oh, second, third.
Although he need not perform prescribed duties, he continues working to set the example for the common men to follow.
Yes, so this is the important thing. Even if one has advanced beyond working in a detached way, and even if one has reached the liberated platform, he still sets the example. Because common men will follow. Okay, next statement, Kamala.
I read my part, so...
Oh, you read, okay. The monitor here. Everybody's a monitor here. Okay, Sylvie.
Krishna uses himself as an example to show that even God works according to scriptures in order to set the standard for others to follow.
Okay, so now we have the topmost authority, the one who gives us the scriptures, following them to set the example. Right? Because if he doesn't, who will? Okay, Gurangi will read the next one.
He describes also how a knowledgeable person should relate to ignorant men who are attached to fruitive results.
This is important, because let's just say you attain a higher position, but you act in such a way that you are intolerant of those who still haven't reached that position. Now that means you forgot what you were like before you got there. So you have to exercise intelligence in how to deal with people so they progress. No one is to be condemned. Everyone is to be understood in his position so that he may advance further. That is the whole premise of the Varnashram system and the Vedic culture. The Vedic culture is designed for the gradual progression of all living entities to the kingdom of God. All right, next.
A devotee should encourage people by his words, an example to engage the results of their work in devotional service.
Notice he should encourage people by his words and his example. Not just his words. His example should match his words. Right? Otherwise, hypocrisy, and no one will believe you. Or the scriptures. Very important. Next. Okay, monitor, you gotta make sure he's on target there. Arjuna is finally, all right?
Arjuna is finally advised.
Arjuna is finally advised to fight with devotion for Krishna and become free from the bondage of fruitive actions.
So now we have the conclusion. He's finally urged to fight. Let's set the example. And our next statement?
Krishna concludes his explanation of Karma Yoga by warning Arjuna not to give up his prescribed duties though there may be some imperfection.
Right, and we're going to have 3 reasons, very brilliant reasons at the end of the section that can be impediments to avoid. But even if your work isn't perfect, you still should do it. Right? Next, our final statement.
He explains that everyone is forced to act according to their nature.
Okay, this is our conclusion. Everyone is forced to act. No one can be inactive, not even for a moment, because the soul is active. And it's the soul that is moving the body. The body is a machine made of material nature. So the action of the body is reflecting the activity of the soul. Now we're going to go into our final subtopic. And Neela, you're going to tell us, did we skip somebody here? Neela next. Beware of lust and anger. Right, everybody has to act, but sometimes people are forced to act sinfully. We don't want to do, we want to act, but we don't want to act sinfully. So Arjuna is asking another question here.
Arjuna asked Krishna what causes us to act sinfully, and Krishna describes our eternal enemy of lust.
Okay, so we have 2 major questions here. Do I work or do I give up work? Which is better, intelligence? Now he's asking, well, if we're forced to act, why do we sometimes act sinfully? And Krishna's answer is? What's Krishna's answer? Lust, yes. Everyone is lust. Okay, Rasamrita will read the next statement.
One can conquer lust by working in Krishna consciousness with steady intelligence, fixed on knowledge of one's pure identity.
So here's the answer. How do we conquer lust? What are the 2 things? You have to work, well, 3 things. You have to work what? In Krishna consciousness. How?
With
steady intelligence. And what else? Fixed on knowledge of what?
Pure identity.
Pure identity. You have to work in Krishna consciousness, steady intelligence, not fluctuating, fixed on knowledge of who you are. Right? Are you the body? Are you the mind? No, you're above all those, and you'll hear this sequence explained. Okay, so now does everyone see how these summaries have helped you?
Yes.
You know the structure? Now here you are filling in some details. Let's see what else in the study guide can help us. Let us go to the charts. The charts are not page numbered. But we have, I think we have 3 charts.
After page 93.
There was a chart later of imaginative. There's one about sacrifice.
Yeah.
Maybe this
The enemy called lust.
Perhaps I'm missing it. There's.
I think the grains,
Yeah, it has that one, but there was another one. And what's the right sacrifice that he said? Okay, anyway, we've got 2. All right.
Even the enemy called lust is there.
All right. Complete dependence of the living entities on whom? Lord. Right. So if anyone thinks he's independent, he's in gross ignorance. Everyone has to eat.
Chapter number 3, Mataji.
Right.
What chapter 3?
Right. This is chart 314 dash verses 15, chart number 3. And here we see the cycle of sacrifice. Oh no, I'm combining here. Everything's here. I thought these were 2 charts. Everything's in one shot. Not only do we get the cycle, but we get the list. Okay? So where do we start? This is going counterclockwise. All embodied conditioned living beings do what? They depend on what?
4 grains.
3 grains. But grain depends on
Rain.
and rain depends on yagya. And yagya comes from prescribed duties. And where do the prescribed duties come from? The Vedas. And where do the Vedas come from?
The Supreme Lord.
Right. So in verse 3.9, when they tell you that you must perform your work as a sacrifice for Vishnu, and somebody says, why? I just have to satisfy my boss and give my paycheck. That's where it comes from. Why should I worship God? I'm doing fine. They don't know the ultimate source of dependence. Everyone is dependent on it. So first you have conditioned beings, grains, yagya, duties, Vedas, the Lord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points. Now we're going to go around the room and we're going to say, what's the first one?
All embodied,
just living beings. Okay, Datri?
Food grains.
Grains. Next?
Grain.
Grain. Next?
Yagya.
Next? Duties. Next?
Vedas.
Right. Next?
The Supreme Lord.
The Lord. All right, start again, but don't look at your chart.
The embodied
Living beings.
Food grain.
Food grains. Neela. Grain. Yagya. Anita. Duties. Vedas.
Lord.
Start again.
All living entities are dependent.
Okay. Okay. What?
Grains.
Grains. Next? Great. Next?
Yagya.
Yagya. Next?
Supreme Lord. No,
Vedas.
Veda.
Duties. Yes. Duties. And then?
Lord.
Vedas. Then?
Supreme.
Lord. Start again.
Grain.
No, grains don't. Grains don't depend on, living entities. Condition limits. Food grains. Rain. Duties.
Yeah.
Duties.
Vedas.
Vedas and love. Okay. Yes, he's got it too. Yeah, he's got it. Very good. He's participating nicely. Start again. Living entities.
Dependent food grains.
Food grains.
Rain.
Vedas.
Anything wrong?
No
Cheating but still.
Yes.
Food grain.
Yagya. Okay.
Prescribed duties.
Right. Yagya comes prescribed duties and the Vedas, and then
Supreme Lord.
Supreme Lord. Very good. Start it again, Anita. We're still not. Everybody's little. They're sitting here. They're shaking. You need to know this cycle, okay?
Beans.
Living beings. Grains.
Sacrifices.
Yes. Yagya. Very good.
Duty.
Prescribed duties. Next. Vedas. Next.
Supreme Lord.
Once again.
Living beings.
Living beings.
Food grains.
Rain. Sacrifice. Yagya. Prescribed duties and Vedas. And the last. Supreme Lord. Very good, Vishnu. He's saying it. Very good.
Matishma, that's verse 3.14, not the 3.9.
Yes, well actually, it's referring to 3.9 because in 3.9 it says work should be done as a sacrifice for Vishnu. So here we have to see why. Why? In this section that explains, right? That's leading into this section. Why do we have to sacrifice for Vishnu? Because we are dependent ultimately on Vishnu. You have to see this whole thing. That's what we're saying. These verses link to each section. The last verse of first section, verse 9, introduces the arguments in this section. Okay, do you follow the logic here? It's a lead-in. It's a link. It's not just an end, dead end. It takes you to the next step as well. All right, now we have 4 steps. First step, what's the purpose of human life?
To please the
To please the Supreme Lord. What's the purpose of human life?
To
Please the Supreme Lord. That is, believe it or not, that's the purpose of human life. Number 2, what's the best process?
To please
the Supreme Lord.
How? Right. So now we're getting more detail. What's your purpose? To please the Lord. How? And what's the best way to do it? And what's the best mantra? Right, your 4-step solution. This is brilliant. Right? So if you wanted to preach to somebody, you give them these 4 points. Your first purpose as a human being is to do what? To please the Lord. And then, how should you do it? By right? And what's the best process for this age? Sankirtan Yajna. And what's your best mantra? Hare Krishna. Very good. So this is a nice simple chart. This is called reformatting skill, where you take important information and you present it in a very simple way. Nice and easy to follow. Let's take a look at our next chart. You see how these charts help you? Yes. This chart does 2 things. It does 2 things. It shows you the sequence of deterioration when lust sets in, and it shows you where is the enemy's strategic sitting place. If it's an enemy, let's just say you're fighting a war. You need to know where the enemy is. You can't fight him if you don't know where he is. Right? If you don't know where the enemy is, how can you fight him? So here, we're going to find out where is the sitting place of this enemy lust. And what happens in the deteriorating process when lust sets in. I think if we heard class this morning, it was a physical law that things unattended without intervention by the law of physics deteriorate. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Just look at your room, for instance. Every day, the walls start to get moldy, the door rots, the metal rusts. Without intervention, and even if with intervention, you can't offset deterioration quickly enough, especially if you're moldy. So here we have this process, as we heard this morning, of deterioration that is a law of physics. It's not a theory. He said that. It's not a theory. You can look around. It's proven. Look at your bodies.
Yeah, except for with nature. Nature recycles itself.
Well, nature does recycle, but the law of something is, in other words, the argument was that we do not advance to a more sophisticated state without endeavor.
Okay.
But the law of physics is if you have something by nature, it will deteriorate. That's the whole age of Kali, the age of deterioration. So first we have this enemy lust. And your first statement, how is it born? How does lust born? In contact with the mode of passion. That's when the love of God comes in contact with the material mode of passion. It is transformed into lust. And we have that as a study question, which we have to cover. Then, what happens with lust? If it's not satisfied, wrath.
What exactly is wrath?
Wrath is anger.
Okay.
Anger. Everybody got the meaning of wrath? Anger. Wrath. Then, this anger forces people to act sinfully. Because anger is in the mode of ignorance. And we find out that it burns like fire. Can it be put out? No. No, it's just it just burns. If you try to satisfy it, it only increases the fire. And here we find that it goes into 3 places. Check them out. Mind, senses, and intelligence. Now that's pretty complete. Your body is made of senses, and above that is the mind, and above that is the intelligence, and what's sitting in all 3? Lust. That's pretty scary. It's sitting in your senses. It is sitting in your mind. And it is also sitting in your intelligence. And how are you going to conquer something like that? We better read this chapter. Pretty serious. Every one of us sitting here has experienced that as jivas, we had originally pure love of God, but when we come in contact and associate with the modes of nature, the mode of passion, that love becomes transformed like milk and tamarind into lust. So every one of us has it. And Krishna, I was thinking Prabhupada this morning, it's there. You have to control it. That's our first verse in NOI. Control those urges. Right? Those 6 urges, they're there. Whether you like to think of it or not. And they're sitting in the mind, the senses, and the intelligence.
Mataji, the enemy is sitting in our kingdom, in our palace, in our home.
Say that slowly again, they're sitting in our
kingdom, in our palace, in our room.
And in our room. Boy, he's got it down. The kingdom and in the palace and in the room. That's really getting into the core. And the central problem is the false ego, and that's the sloka we want to try to do today. Okay? Let us take out our yellow book. Do you have a basic idea now of chapter 3?
Yeah.
Okay. Let us now take out our books. So we want to go through the verses, and then we want to start 2 and 3. I mean 2:13 and 3:27. And a study question also. How many of you did your homework? Did you have some study questions? Oh, good. Let's go around with that one really quickly. I failed to complete my last set. I have first part of the lesson. Let's take out our study question. These questions take us deeply into the purport. So we have lesson 13, lesson 14, and lesson 15. And 12 also, right?
12, yes.
12, yes. 12, 13, 14, and 15. Okay. So our first question, can you read what was the first? We're just going to read the question so everybody knows what are the questions we have to think about. What's your first question? You read the first question?
Explain the relation between Buddhi Yoga and Sankhya Yoga.
Okay, and this is what we call a compare and contrast purport. What kind is it?
Compare and
contrast. We're comparing 2 processes, Buddhi and Sankhya. Brilliant purport. Buddhi Yoga and Sankhya. All right, and can you read the second question? Just read the question.
Explain the term Mityachara.
Mityachara. Okay? So this is a very important verse, 3.6. All right, next question.
What is the function of the demigods? Why are they worshipped?
Right, so we understand now what do the demigods do and why are they worshipped? Okay, why? What do they do, or what is their purpose, and why? What's our next question, Sylvie?
How is the ritual of yajna an indirect practice of Krishna consciousness?
How is the ritual of yajna an indirect practice of Krishna consciousness? That's a very important question. Okay. Next question.
Why does Krishna strictly perform prescribed duties of Varnashram Dharma?
Yes, Krishna performs prescribed duties very carefully, very strictly. And next,
briefly explain the consciousness of one who acts under false ego.
This is a memory verse, 3:27. Brilliant purport. Brilliant purport. What is the consciousness of one who's under the influence of false ego? And that has to apply to some degree or other to all embodied beings, including those of us present today. Next.
explain the analogy of the milk.
Right, and that one we just talked about in the contact of the love, the passion, turning into lust. That's their analogy. And our last question.
How can an aspiring transcendentalist conquer lust?
Right, this is our important issue in this book. All of us are aspiring transcendentalists. We wouldn't be sitting here if we were not aspiring. How can we conquer that enemy that's sitting in our senses, that's sitting in our minds, and that's sitting in our intelligence? We need to know. It's not just something on the print on a book that's interesting. We need to know what is the process of doing this. Okay? So, those of us who have some answers, do we have someone who would like to share the answer to the first lesson, which was the relationship between Buddhi and Sankhya? You have many points. This is a compare and contrast. Okay, go ahead.
Sankhya Yoga is the analytical study of the nature of spirit and matter. It is the subject matter for those who are inclined to speculate. Whereas in Buddhi Yoga one works in devotion in Krishna consciousness and is relieved from the bonds of action, and he is entirely dependent on Krishna, and in this way all the senses can be brought under control very easily. Therefore, both yogas are interdependent as religion and philosophy. Religion without philosophy is some sentiment, and philosophy without religion is mental speculation.
This is quoted often in lectures. Religion without philosophy is called what? And sometimes fanaticism. You'll find that if you find people are fanatic about religion, they're not philosophically grounded. But if you're just philosophical and there is no action, what happens?
Mental
Speculation and can be dry. So you see, the Sankhya process is the analytical one. And the work in devotion is recommended because it's natural, it's easy, right? It's the result is guaranteed. You're immediately making Krishna the central point, and there's no flaw in the process.
And although the ultimate goal is Krishna, the process of Sankhya Yoga is indirect.
Right. And ultimately, Sankhya will take you there, because the goal is to get to Krishna. For both, the goal is there. But the better, the recommended process is devotional service, and he equates Buddhi with that. Prabhupada's often equating karma yoga, Buddhi yoga, it gets a little confusing, but ultimately devotional service in Krishna consciousness is what he's stressing. Very nice answer.
Where'd you find that?
Yeah, give your reference. Very good monitor here. What's our reference?
BG 3.3.
BG 3.3 purport. But we're getting very scholarly in this room. Thank you. Are you all finding this is helping you?
Yes.
All right. Who would like to give us the definition and explanation of the term and why it's important? Mithyachar. Nurangi put up her hand. Okay, very important now. This stresses the importance of being the same inside and outside. Inside and outside for devotee. You shouldn't be something outside and you have a different personality inside. That's very, it's considered the worst. Okay, go ahead.
Mityacharana means pretender.
Pretender, yes.
His knowledge has no value because the effects of such a simple man's knowledge are taken away by the illusory energy of the Lord. Such a person such a pretender's mind is always impure, and therefore his show of yogic meditation has no value whatsoever.
Right, so here we have the description of someone whose external activities say one thing, but whose mind is actually not on the same platform. Mentally and actions they're not in the same alignment. Mentally, there's meditation on the sense objects, but there's an external show. And that is called a pretender, and Prabhupada said that person is the greatest cheater. Especially when they take the role of trying to cheat the innocent public. So this is not recommended, this external show of meditation, but inside the mind is somewhere else. So Krishna is recommending something else to the sincere devotee. Okay, very good. Who would like to offer the response for the function of the demigods and why they are worshipped? Who would like to share that? Kamala wants to share. Who are the demigods and why are they worshipped?
The function of demigods is to supply water, light, air, and all other benedictions for maintaining body and soul of every living entity. They are worshipped because by pleasing them, there will not be any scarcity in the supply of natural products. Purport 3:11.
Okay, very good. The demigods are the administrators of universal affairs. They are the limbs of the Lord. They are empowered agents to provide supply. And they're worshipped, so there is a reciprocation between man and demigods. That opening line was, in the beginning of creation, the Lord sent forth men and demigods. And if they acted in cooperation, there would be, the demigods would be pleased by sacrifice, and in return they would provide all the necessities. Again, I heard Prabhupada say on the lecture, he said, it's not that you should not live comfortably, but what is the purpose? If the purpose is sense gratification, it's sin. If the purpose is to live comfortably, to perform yajna to please Krishna, that is piety. That is the process. Without Krishna, everything is just something. Okay, very nice. How is the ritual of yajna an indirect practice of Krishna consciousness? Has anyone gotten that far? Anybody got that far with the homework? We have, anybody else here? We have Krishnadas. We'll start again.
The ritual of yajna is an indirect practice of Krishna consciousness because the demigods are authorized supplying agents on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu or Krishna, and the yajnas prescribed for different kinds of demigods are ultimately offered to Vishnu.
Right. It's indirect because ultimately Krishna is the backdrop to even yajnas. Even if the performer is not aware of it, all sacrifices are ultimately for the pleasure of yajnapati, of Krishna. All right? And what happens is as they perform yajnas, they become purified and eventually, gradually come to Krishna consciousness. Yes. And Sankirtan Yajna is the prescribed yajna for the deliverance of all men in the present age. Who would like to tell us why Krishna performs his duties? Well, we got 2 or 3 people really doing their homework here. Yay. How about you? Do you have anything?
No, not yet.
Okay, go ahead.
The rules and regulations are for the conditioned souls and not for the Lord Krishna, because he descended to establish the principles of religion. He followed the prescribed rules. Otherwise, common man would follow in his footsteps because he is the greatest authority.
Yes, he knows that if he comes to establish religion, he himself establishes that he must set the example, common men will follow. Yeah. And also he, and another person, he feels himself as the father of everyone, indirectly responsible. You see how Krishna acts? He's indirectly responsible if people are misguided. Right? Someone may say, oh, I don't have anything to do with that problem. No, Krishna takes even indirect responsibility for men acting in a way that will be beneficial for them. They must follow in the footsteps of the Lord, but not attempt to imitate his extraordinary activities. That often you find people try to imitate Krishna's dancing with the gopis or lifting Govardhan Hill, not possible. Okay. Who would like to explain the consciousness of one who acts in false ego? Kamala, all right?
The consciousness of one who acts under false ego is that he thinks himself the doer of everything and he is not aware that the mechanism of the body is produced by material nature, and it is under the supervision of the Supreme Lord. Because of nations, he is taking all the credit for doing everything independently and has no knowledge that he is under control of Krishna. He does not know that his subtle and gross body is the creation of material nature, and he should engage his body and mind in serving Lord Krishna. He forgets that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Rishikesh, or the master of senses of the material body, and due to his misuse of the senses in sense gratification, he is in fact bewildered by his false ego, which makes him to forget his eternal relationship with Krishna. 327.
327, and that's the verse we're going to go over a little bit. So the thing that the false ego does is convince one, because of from time immemorial, sense gratification, which covers one's real intelligence, and that sense of independence from the Lord makes him think the doer. But we have three doers. The living entity's desire, the Lord's sanction, and the material nature carrying out the desire. So that verse is very important, 327. And we've done a little bit about the analogy of milk. Has someone written that out? Okay, Krishna, you write what you wrote.
When a living entity comes in contact with the material world, his eternal love for Krishna is transformed into lust in association with the mode of passion. As milk in contact with sour tamarind, it is transformed into curd.
Right, so if you want to make milk into yogurt, you have to put some kind of a souring agent or tamarind. So the minute our original love for Krishna came in contact with the material mode of passion, what was the result? Lust. That's what happened. Okay, and then the last one, did someone write that? I haven't finished that one myself. Nobody else? You have it. Okay, she's done it, all right?
But you read Mataji.
I don't have mine. That's the last one I haven't done. I have the last one.
The aspiring transcendentalist can conquer lust by keeping aloof from the objects of the senses, and with intelligence he has to seek out for the constitutional position of the soul and strengthen his mind by use of intelligence and engage in it always in Krishna consciousness.
Right. You have to, first of all, you have to regulate the senses. That's the first step. That's why in devotional service, the 4 regulative principles, and you're given a schedule. Eat at a certain time, sleep at a certain time. You can't just say, I'm going to control my senses. You have to put them under regulation, and then by superior intelligence, right, in Krishna consciousness, understand you're not the body, you're not the senses, you're not the mind, you're not the intelligence, you're superior to all of those. And with that fixed knowledge in Krishna consciousness, that by steady intelligence you can conquer lust. That's the final sloka. Okay, let's try that verse now, 327. Okay, we'll try going around the room with that sloka. If you take out your sloka sheets, your set of your sloka sheets.
I forgot to.
Okay.
I will tell you later.
We'll go around the room doing the exercise.
39. Something yes,
you have nice big text here in your papers. Okay, get out your papers. You have your papers? See if we can do both in the last, maybe 5 minutes each. Let's see how we can do going around the room. The best way to learn something, first of all, is to understand it, understand the meaning of the Sanskrit. For the English, because all of you are proficient in English, some of you boys are proficient in Sanskrit, is to break up the topic into phrases. Okay? So let's go to 214. We'll do that one first, and we'll go around the room the way we did with our other exercises. I think we found that worked really, really well.
I think that's actually 213. That's a mistake.
This is two. Oh, it's a mistake. Yeah, it's 213. Right. I don't know why. Sorry, no, it's 213. 214 is non-permanent appearance of something.
Not that special.
I don't know how that happened. I think she had to type this out.
Again, for I don't
327. That's a mistake too. Oh, okay, mistake there also. All right, someone help us by at least typing this out for us. So. Okay, nice and large for you, easy to read. Okay.
227.
All right, let us go now to 213. Correct that on your sheet. It's 213.
It's not 214? 14?
Yes, but it's incorrect. It's 213.
213.
Oh,
213. That's your first number first. It's a mistake on the page. Okay. So first we're going over the meaning. We'll go around the room. Datri, you're ready. What's the meaning of Dehino?
One of the embodied.
Of the embodied. And Asmin?
In this.
In this. And Yata?
As.
Next? Kurangi?
In the body.
In the body. And Kumara?
Boyhood.
Yovana? Youth. And what's the next one? Old age. And Tata? Similarly. And Rasamita, are you able to?
Dehantra
Okay, Dehantra.
of transference of the body.
Transference of the body. And Prapti?
Prapti, achievement.
Achievement. And now we're back to Datre.
The sober.
Dira means the sober. And Tatra?
Thereafter?
Na means?
Never.
Never. And Muyati? Is deluded. Okay, so Dehina means embodied. Yata, Dehe means body. And then we know what Kumara means. The little boy. Yovana, youth. Jada, old age. Similarly, you're transmigrating in the body. It's not as though it's at the end only. You're transmigrating all the time. Dehantara, transference of the body. Right? Prapti means what do you achieve? And Dira is the sober person. He is not deluded by such a thing. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we have Dehino Smin Yata Dehe. Komadam Yonam Jara. Tata Dehana Prati. Dira Sastra Anuyati. So let us say Dehino Smin Yata Dehe. All right, let us go around the room and each one of you say it. Datri, you say it.
Dehinosmin yata dehe.
You repeat it?
Dehinosmin yata dehe.
Okay, Sylvie? Can you say the first line?
Dehino. Read it. Okay.
Yeah, just read it.
Dehinosmin yata dehe.
Okay?
Dehinosmin yata dehe.
Dehinosmin yatha dehe.
Dehinosmin yata dehe.
Dehinosmin yatha dehe.
Dehinosmin yata dehe.
Dehinosmin yata dehe.
Next, you say.
Dehinosmin yata dehe.
Very good. Dehinosmin yata dehe. All right? The next line is Komadam Yovanam Jara. Okay? Komadam. So we did signals for this one. Komadam Yovanam Jara. Okay. Komadam. Yes, Komadam Yovanam Jara. Yeah, lots of signals there, right? Yovanam? Ah, you have strength, right? But Jada, you don't. You have the third leg, right? You have the walking stick, Jada. Okay, so Komanam, Yovanam, Jada. Quickly, Datri, say the 3 words.
Komanam
Yovanam
jara.
Okay.
Komanam yovanam jara.
Sylvie?
Komaram yovanam jara.
Kamaram Yovanam Jara. Kamaram Yovanam Jara.
Kamaram Yovanam Jara.
Kamaram Yovanam Jara.
Okay, Brasarita?
Kaumaram Yovanam Jara.
Very good.
Kaumaram Yovanam Jara.
Very good. Right, Komaram?
Komaram
Yovanam Jara. All right, now, the next line is the transference, okay? Tata dehantara praptir. Okay, you say it?
Tata dehantaram praptir.
Tata dehantara praptir.
Tata deantara praptir.
Tatha dehantara praptir.
तथा देहांतर प्राप्ति
तथा देहांतर प्राप्ति
तथा देहांतर प्राप्ति
तथा देहांतर प्राप्ति
Little one, is he going to chime in? No, he doesn't want to do it.
Tata dehantarin prapti.
Dehantara, yeah, tata dehantara
Tata dehantara prapti.
Here, now our last one, Dira Statra Namuyati.
Dira
Jes tatra namuhyati.
Dhiras tatra namuhyati.
Yes?
Dhiras tatra namuhyati.
धीरस् तत्र न मुह्यते
धीरस् तत्र न मोह्यति
धीरस्तत्र नमोयति
धीरस्तत्र न मुह्यति
धीरस्तत्र न मुह्यति
Dhirastatra namuhyati.
Very good. So now you got that. Now, when we break up for the English, because the Sanskrit is very nice because the endings rhyme and they're musical. English, the only way to do it is to take phrases. So what we do is we'll say, as the embodied soul, repeat,
as the embodied soul
continuously passes in this body, from boyhood to youth, to old age. The soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. See, so the English you have to break it up by phrases and signals help. Let's try that when you're done.
Mataji, you had made that jingle, remember?
Oh yes, I can do my operatic voice. If you want to hear a voice out of tune, you can listen to me sing it. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, so similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Okay, so we're going to go. Let's follow with the signals. You want to sing it?
Yes.
Yeah. As the embodied soul. Repeat that. Okay. As the embodied soul. As the embodied soul. Now, continuously passes. Continuously passes. One more time. Continuously passes. Continuously passes. In this body. In this body. From boyhood. From boyhood to youth. To youth. To old age. The soul similarly passes to another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Very nice. Like that. Okay. Shall we try 327? Sure. Okay, so you can practice these little melodies when you're taking a shower. Chopping your vegetables. When we taught the children, when I was doing the preschool group, we did these slokas as our warm-up in the morning, and we would sing them every day as we would go, you know. We learned one a week. And some of the mothers would say they were going through the house singing as they embodied. Because everybody knows, you know, jingles, people like jingles, the commercial people know that, you know, things go better with Coke, right? And they get you singing a jingle, you know, and then you go to the store and you buy it, you know.
What do things go better with?
Things go better. So jingles help, and I'm very happy to laugh. Okay. So even preschoolers who do Karmi slokas learn that, right? Karmi slokas. All right, now let's do the English first on the translation. translation. We'll start out with the jingle first, okay?
Okay.
We'll break it up. First repeat it straight. The spirit soul.
The spirit soul.
Bewildered by.
Bewildered by.
The influence of false ego.
The influence of false ego.
Thinks himself.
Thinks himself.
The doer of activities.
The doer of activities.
That are in actuality.
That are in actuality.
Carried out.
Carried out.
Three modes. That helps you get the meaning. Right? The spirit soul.
The spirit soul.
Bewildered by.
Bewildered by.
The influence of false ego.
The influence of false ego.
Thinks himself.
Thinks himself.
The doer of activities.
The doer of activities.
That are in actuality.
That are in actuality.
Carried out by the three modes.
Carried out by the three modes.
Should we try it one more time? Because that'll help you.
Yeah.
All right. The spirit soul.
The spirit soul.
Bewildered by.
Bewildered by.
The influence.
The influence.
Of false ego.
Of false ego.
Thinks himself.
Thinks himself.
The doer of.
The doer of.
Activities.
Activities.
That are in actuality.
That are in actuality.
Carried out.
Carried out.
And we have a song for that one. Yes. Yes. Have to take lemon juice. Okay. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality, carried out by the three modes of material nature. It does help, right? It gives you a pleasant way to take the medicine. These verses are heavy medicine. Shall we try it with the melody? Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence, false ego, thinks himself, the doer of activities that are in actuality, by the three modes of material nature. Carried out by the three modes of material nature. Ah, very good. Okay, very good. So we have, and now actually we were even doing the Sanskrit to this. So listen as I try with the Sanskrit. Now the reverse goes with the meaning. Prakriti Kriyamanani.
Prakriti Kriyamanani.
Gune Karmani Sarvashaha.
Gune Karmani Sarvashaha.
Ahankara Vimurhatma.
Ahankara Vimurhatma.
Kartaham iti manyate.
Kartaham iti manyate.
Okay, I think that's a little easier. Now the meaning, Prakriti is what?
Material
nature.
Kriyamanani means
Being done.
Done. Guna by what?
By
Karmani is what?
Activities.
Sarvashaha.
All kinds of.
Ahankara Vimurhatma.
Vimurhatma.
Right. Atma.
Spirit soul.
Atma. Kartaham.
The doer.
Right. He thinks he's the doer of, and intimanyate. He thinks. All right. Now, as our final, I would like you to take out your yellow charts we gave you on the yoga ladder. You all have your little yoga ladder charts?
Yeah.
This is a very important one because this chapter begins the yoga ladder. And you have here Gurujan Prabhu's commentary on the different levels of realization. So the yoga ladder Do we have an extra one? Yeah. Sigrid has no money. Do you have one here? It's, I guess we should make them up. I need to borrow one. Here you go. Please go and borrow this. Okay, the yoga ladder is a progressive development of the living entity through the different stages of realization and development. And again, I was listening, Prabhupada said everyone in the human form of life is born in ignorance because ultimately we have been progressing through lower species. And when one comes to the human platform, he's still in ignorance. That's why we have schools. Right? There would not be so many schools if people knew how to do everything. But real knowledge is the self. That's knowledge. And how to achieve one's eternal relationship with the Supreme. And that is the process which is described as a step-by-step yoga ladder to perfection. So here, if we start at the bottom on our yoga ladder, we have animal life. And that does not necessarily mean four-legged. According to the scriptures, there are two-legged animals. And guess what body they have? Human form. So if someone is not practicing religion on some level, the scriptures define that entity as a two-legged animal. It's an animal in a human form. So most of the world is in that category. And that is why it is very important to spread the mission of Krishna consciousness. Because Krishna consciousness is the purifying agent as well as the goal. It is the means and the goal. Without knowledge of Krishna consciousness, again, the descending process sets in. Species, and then they have to go through the whole evolutionary process to come to the human form, which is given sufficient brain substance, usually, for inquiring as to the goal of life and how to achieve it. Okay? So here, animal life doesn't just mean four legs. It can be two. And anyone not practicing progressive spiritual life has to be called by scriptural definition an animal in the form of a human. So that gives you a different way to look at people.
There is a verse for this in Mahabharata also. Dharmena hina pashubi samana.
Right. You have two-legged animals. So most of the world is running around like that. And unfortunately thinking they're very learned, very rich, very important, very intelligent, okay, but by scriptural definition, they're in ignorance. And it's a very sad state because actions will determine the next body. So if the actions are on the animal platform, the next body will probably have to, nation will have to give them a corresponding body because your body is determined by your state of consciousness, not by your own desire. Your consciousness at the time of death, developed throughout your life. So all of us are developing our next body right now. And so are the people out there, whether they realize it or not. They have to be given knowledge of this very serious truth. Okay? So animal life, but if we come up to karma kanda, we now begin what?
Human life.
Just human life. That means one is following a religious process to satisfy the senses. But at least they're following scriptural regulations on some level. Okay. Now here we have a dotted line. And from this point here, below the dotted line, the interest is in satisfying material desires. Either by scripture or just without any restriction, that's animal. Like people in the West, or anybody even now in India, if there's no regard for scripture, if there's a disregard for scripture, if there's to say there's no God, then obviously the only goal can be satisfaction of the senses. If the satisfaction of the senses is according to scriptures, it's the karma conduct. But the goal is, I accept an authority. Otherwise, people don't accept it. So that's the first step, and that begins human life when you accept there's a higher authority I have to please to get what I want. Right? Like I may go to a candy machine, but I have to put money in to get the candy. Okay? Now, above the line, this accepts a transcendental goal. This person is on the yoga ladder. He may not have the goal, but he's on a rung. He's on a rung. So the first one is karma yoga. And there are two stages of karma yoga. Sakam karma yoga, right, with full of desires, and niskam karma yoga, where you're reducing your desires without the needs. Okay. Then above that is gyan. There's knowledge. Wow, this world brings misery results. If I try to not act, I will not get reaction. There's an awareness that action brings reaction. I'm being bound. I realize I'm soul, I'm not the body. Okay. Yeah, that's higher. That's the level of the knowledge. This is work. Gyan is not. Then Astanga. This is the meditative process by which one then focuses on the super soul. Now you see now another dotted line. This is still within the realm of the three modes. Karma, Gyan, and Astanga. They still are based on desire. We came across that in NOI, remember? There were the bhukti muktis, and the bhuktis, the muktis, and the cities. Those are the three kinds who have greed, lobh. It's still a desire. These Astanga Yoga mystics, they want to be able to fly around or, whatever. They have mystic desires to take anything from anywhere. That's desire. And they will never be peaceful, and they're still under the jurisdiction of the three modes. They're not free. Liberation beyond the modes can be in two directions. It can be Brahman or Paramatma. Either way, Brahman. Now those who wish to attain Brahman for lack of higher awareness, Brahmavadis. The Mayavadi conception doesn't fit into that category because the Mayavadi conception actually says, well, I am God. So that is considered not part of this process. That is incorrect. Paramatma realization is valid. Either one of these, if there is contact with a devotee of the Lord, then bhakti, the seed of bhakti, can be planted. So the only hope for the Brahmavadis or the Paramatma realization person is to come in contact with a devotee, and the seed of bhakti is planted. Then bhakti yoga is the process for Bhagavan realization, which is the ultimate realization of God. And there are stages of that, as we know in our process. So this is an interesting thing, and next time we will read more about karma, the ladder here, animal life, karma, karma yoga, stuff. We'll put this in your files. This is a very helpful series. And you'll see that's taken from the book Surrender on Giving. Thank you. You have one?
Can we take the yoga ladder?
We didn't make more. I guess I thought we had made 25. Oh, there are more here. Yes. Okay.
You have one now.
Yeah, you need a protection sheet. Okay. So we will put our flight attendants prepared to put the ladder. I did not have an opportunity to take us through all of our slokas today, but please, when you go home, I think when you read them now, read the first sloka, read the 9th, then read the 10th sloka, and then read the 16th, and then read the 17th, and then the 35th. Then read number 36, and then read number 43. Then go through and enumerate the points. What is the argument that brings me from the first one to the last one? And you will see how Krishna develops things very intelligently. You'll get his questions to start the whole process, which is better. Then he says, I will tell you, work in devotion is better. And then he will tell you why. No one can be, by giving up work, right? That's not possible. You can't avoid sin. And also by renouncing work, you cannot attain perfection. And now everybody is forced to act. So if externally you try to restrain, but internally your mind is not there, that won't work. So working in devotion, he argues, this is the safe and sure process for elevation. Then he leads you into worship. Your work has to be done as a sacrifice for Vishnu. That takes you into the next section. And then you'll see how those sacrifices are performed in cooperation with the demigods, and why they're all based on, yajna is based on grains, and fire. Yajna, rain. Why? Because the Lord has given us this process by which we can attain Him. How can we get to Him? By sacrifice. So then the next question is, how do I do it? So the Vedas prescribe, and the prescription for age is Hare Krishna. Then the next section, what about those who have attained perfection? What do? They work to set the example. Kings like Janak attain perfection. Krishna performs his duty. And how do they treat people who do not have that platform? Engage them in devotional service. Don't tell them to give up work, it won't work. Right? And then finally, then if everyone's forced to act helplessly, three obstacles. Please, listen one more point. One of the obstacles is to be bewildered by attraction and repulsion. That is an obstacle. Obstacles what? For realization. Another obstacle is to perform somebody else's duty. To perform somebody else's duty. And let's see, attraction, aversion, or stumbling blocks. Performing somebody else's duty. I'm trying to think of what the other one is. Oh, repression. Repression. You must act according to your nature. Those are the three things you must follow. Do not repress your nature. Follow your nature. Avoid attraction and aversion. They will keep you here. And perform your duty and not others, even if it's faulty. Those are the three important steps in that section.
The first one.
Follow your nature. Don't repress it. Second one, do not be bewildered by attraction and repulsion. Both of them keep you here. They're stumbling blocks. Repression, I don't like this, I like this. I like this, I don't like that. That keeps us here. And the final one is performing your duty, not the duty of somebody else. Three important stumbling blocks. Okay, bunch of and I hope you find this chapter, you'll find this chapter is very deep, because now Krishna's unfolding the philosophy. This